Hey, what's up everybody, and welcome back to a Saturday edition to News Dose. I know some of you all might be wondering where I've been the last few days and why I didn't post any videos. Well, I feel like I might have a reasonable answer to that, and that's because at 3 a.m. on Thursday, my wife's water broke. Yeah, so there it is. We highjetted it over the hospital and had ourselves a baby boy. His name is Leon. He's absolutely adorable, and luckily, everything's good. Both him and my wife are healthy. I mean, she was an absolute champ through this entire thing. I can't be more proud of her. And I mean, really, women are just amazing and what they have to deal with. But we're good. And ultimately, we're looking forward to the future. Now, with that said, the future also includes, of course, you, the audience, as well. So the show must go on. And there was actually some very big things that happened over the last few days that we need to talk about. This includes Phil Spencer's message to Xbox about their future after the shocking results of the CMA's Activision Blizzard decision. Sounds like there's still plenty of optimism within Xbox, and I do think for good reasons, so we'll talk about that today. And then also PlayStation. The PlayStation 5 did, after all, break a major record, and wow. PlayStation 5 is just on fire right now. That's the best way I can put it here. As always, though, before we get started, do hit those buttons below. It's a big help to the channel. Also, I do have a Patreon account if you want to support me over there. And seriously, to all my patrons, thank you so very much. You all are absolutely amazing. Other than that, though, you know it. Let's just go and jump right into it. Starting off with Star Wars Jedi Survivor. Jedi Survivor, one of the biggest releases for 2023, did just launch, and with that, there's two different things happening here. The first is its reviews, as it currently sits at an 86 overall score on Metacritic. From what critics describe, it's a great follow-up to Fallen Order, which, I mean, to a lot of people, that game was already one of, if not the very best Star Wars game ever made. According to several reviews, the follow-up is just as good, if not better, or at least in terms of its fun factor. However, and here's the problem, there's been some major concern, some major questions regarding these reviews because the community haven't been able to focus on that fun factor as much as you might hope. Instead, Jedi Survivor unfortunately also has some pretty notable performance issues, especially when it comes to the PC version. Now, I have heard the console versions are better, though they're not perfect by any stretch of the means either, but on PC specifically, it's reportedly much worse. In fact, look no further than Steam reviews, where it has a 43% approval rating as of this recording. Yeah, it's pretty bad right now, and that all seems linked to what fans are describing as terrible performance problems, and that seems to be relatively across the board. I've seen some people come out and say that they have a graphics card that cost them well over $1,000, and even still, Jedi Survivor is missing the mark. So that's a real shame here, because apparently this is a fun game when, and that right there, that's a key word, but when it's stable. This does kind of beg the question, though. What's up with the critic reviews? Some critics did point out the performance isn't necessarily perfect, but there's also several reviews that just kind of gleamed over it and gave it a top tier score anyways. And this has raised some alarms from several fans out there on why this wasn't more in the forefront. You would think that these reviewers would maybe talk about the performance problems a little bit more, at least let consumers know, but that doesn't seem to be the case here, or at least when it comes to all reviews. I guess if anything, though, at the very least, it does sound like Respawn nailed the gameplay, but sadly in this situation, it's another AAA game with the mindset of launch it now, fix it later. Next up here, and this is actually pretty exciting stuff, but some possible new details for the ROG Ally might have leaked out a little bit early. We've talked about this device a few different times, and honestly, I mean, I think that this thing sounds pretty incredible so far. It is a Windows 11 handheld PC, after all, made by Asus. It's also more powerful than the Steam Deck, and they even partnered up with Xbox to include 3 months of Xbox Game Pass Ultimate. So everything right now sounds absolutely fantastic, but with that, what about the price? That right there, that's been the big question so far. For as good as the ROG Ally sounds on paper, and for as good as the initial preview seems, is this thing actually going to be affordable? Well, according to a new leak reported on by The Verge, just like the Steam Deck, there are multiple SKUs of the ROG Ally incoming, with the cheapest right now being $599. This model come included with an AMD Ryzen Z1 chip and a 256GB NVMe solid-state drive. For $699, though, you can get the ROG Ally with a Z1 Extreme chip and a 512GB solid-state drive. So I'm happy to say that both of these are very affordable options when it comes to the PC handheld market. You know, when this thing was first announced, a lot of people originally thought that the ROG Ally was going to be around $1,000, if not even more than that. But here, in fact, not only does it sound like it'll be significantly cheaper than expected, but also that entry-level option is actually cheaper than the most expensive Steam Deck, which is $650 for 512 gigabytes. Now, to be fair here, these prices are yet to be confirmed. These are unproven leaks for the time being. But if this does actually hold true, the PC handheld market just got extremely interesting. Even I'm honestly heavily considering getting one of these myself, even though I already own a Steam Deck. Let's go and talk about Xbox, though, because with all the turmoil of the CMA Activision Blizzard decision, there's been a lot of speculation of what's next for the Xbox brand if this deal does indeed fall through. Xbox right now is the distant third-place console manufacturer, and by this point, the Xbox doom and gloom is very real. I mean, you all know how the internet works. There's some hot takes out there, and I'll just kind of leave it at that. Well, head of Xbox Phil Spencer did reportedly hold an internal meeting to address Xbox's future, and this is what he said. The acquisition was intended to speed up Microsoft's gaming plans, but it doesn't represent the entirety of the company's gaming strategy, which will move ahead even without Activision. So what he's trying to do here is he's attempting to raise morale with his staff. Obviously, if acquired, Activision Blizzard would be a huge boon for them going forward. It could really kickstart Xbox Game Pass to that next gear, which is a major part of their future. And I do think that that's the key to this acquisition. I've said this before, but I don't believe this acquisition is necessarily about exclusives, but rather, I think that their goal with Activision Blizzard King is to boost Xbox Game Pass numbers with all of their different popular IP, especially Call of Duty, and to also give themselves an opportunity in mobile gaming with the pickup of King. However, I like Phil Spencer's wording here because I think it's ultimately true. This acquisition was to accelerate their plans for Xbox, but by no means is it the determining factor for the future of their brand. I feel like some people are just kind of glossing over this, but it's important to keep in mind that Microsoft has acquired and built 19 studios since 2018, and that, of course, includes the mega acquisition of Bethesda just a few years back. And the thing about those acquisitions is that we still really haven't seen the fruit of those labors yet. Again, this is something that some people kind of gloss over, but game development, it takes a long time. I mean, AAA games anymore, those games often take like 5 years plus of development. And with several of these acquisitions, they already had contracts pre-acquisition that they needed to finish up with before focusing on Xbox. So it's taking a while for some of these studios to really ingrain themselves in Xbox, but over the next few years, we are kind of hitting those marks now where development should finish up with some of these big AAA games. So over the next few years is really when you're going to start to see a higher volume of big first-party Xbox games like Starfield, like Fable, Hellblade, Avowed, and all the other unannounced IP that they have in development. I mean, even before Microsoft announced their intent to acquire Activision, fans were incredibly excited about their future. Now things are kind of changing because there's been this hypothetical situation for so long that it feels like, what could have been. And I mean, we still don't know what's going to happen with all that. I mean, it could still pass. We'll see how that plays out. But one thing that I do know is that this does not sound like a company that's going to go away simply because of a setback. If anything, Microsoft seems fully invested in Xbox right now. I think that was already evident pre-Activision Blizzard, and it's definitely evident now considering that they're willing to pay $69 billion for a game company. If anything, that just shows you how committed Microsoft actually is. They are willing to put the money forth to improve their gaming sector. You don't just invest that much money into something if you're not fully committed for the long haul. Again, we're not even to the point where those original acquisitions have shown the fruit of their labor. So in reality, what I think will happen here is, let's just go and say hypothetically, the Activision Blizzard acquisition falls through. If that happens, Microsoft will probably just go and take that money and just try and acquire somebody else. they could target independent studios at a high volume, and I mean a very, very high volume if they really wanted to go in that direction. They could also target other smaller publishers like Capcom, Sega, Square Enix. I'm not saying that I want that to happen, but it could be a little bit more within their reach, all while improving their foothold in Japan. They could also go hyper-aggressive with third-party exclusives, kind of like what PlayStation does, or could just pump money into the internal studios that they already have. So I don't think that this is the end for Xbox acquisitions. If anything, I expect their acquisitions to ramp up if this deal indeed does fall through. For the time being, though, I guess we'll just have to kind of wait and see what happens next for Activision Blizzard. All eyes are currently on the EU and their upcoming decision that should come in next month, and that very well might be the deciding factor on what Microsoft does next. Either which way, though, I do agree with Phil Spencer. I believe that Xbox will have a bright future with or without Activision Blizzard. Let's go talk about PlayStation now, because there's no concern about them whatsoever. In fact, Sony just reported that the PlayStation 5 sold 6.3 million units in Q1 2023. And I mean, just kind of put that in perspective here, that means that the PlayStation 5 just had the best-selling Q1 in console history. And yes, you heard that right, in console history. I mean, if you think about it, that means the PlayStation 5 just had a better Q1 even than the PlayStation 2 at its peak. It had a better Q1 than the Nintendo Wii at its peak, and I mean, that thing was flying off shelves there for a while. So this only gets more and more impressive the more you think about it. All this was now capable, though, because of its increased stock supply. There for such a long time, and this has been such a talking point for this generation of consoles, is the near impossibility of finding a PlayStation 5 in stock. But now, they have officially flooded the market. Actually, I was just at Best Buy a few days ago, and right behind the cashier, there was a literal wall of PlayStation 5 bundles. You know, of course, they had the God of War bundle. There was also the Horizon Forbidden West bundle, but there was a literal wall of these things ready to go. Now, the Xbox Series X, though, interesting enough, I only saw like maybe 4 or 5 units. Now, that might be a little anecdotal, but it does make me kind of wonder if Xbox is maybe still dealing with supply issues for the Series X. They did kind of allude to that in a recent fiscal year report, but I mean, I tell you what, I have to really applaud Sony for what they've done this year. I might not always necessarily agree with Jim Ryan or Sony's PR per se. They've said some things over the last couple of years that's, you know, wow. But I do genuinely love their consoles, and I think the PlayStation 5 is a phenomenal console with an already great library of games. So kudos to Sony for all of their success with the PlayStation 5. I think it's well deserved, and really I think it's only going to get better from this point forward. I'm really hoping that rumored May PlayStation event is as good as it sounds. Let's go take a look at the poll of the day. Where I asked you all, what new game releasing in May 2023 are you most excited for? And as you can see here, and this should not come as a big surprise, but 52% of you all, being the majority, did vote for Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. Now, Redfall did come in at second place with 34% of the votes, and then after that, 7% of you all voted for Other, 4% for The Lord of the Rings Gollum, and then only 3% of you all voted for Lego 2K Drive. I actually figured that would be a little bit higher up on the list here, but yeah, Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, without a doubt, is the most anticipated game for the month of May. I mean, this is, after all, following up a game that a lot of people do consider as one of the greatest games of all time, being Zelda Breath of the Wild. So, to say there's a little excitement for this game is probably a bit of an understatement here, but the results just once again shows that. And, I mean, if anything, I think the excitement for this game is only ramped up with its recent trailer. I feel like with Tears of the Kingdom, they've kind of done this drip feed, and it hasn't really done this game a lot of favors, but with their recent gameplay trailer, I think that it answered a lot of questions. It looks like a ton of fun. I know there's still the question on whether or not it will have legitimate dungeons. That is something that I want to know myself, as I prefer classic Zelda games as opposed to the Breath of the Wild formula. But despite that, Tears of the Kingdom looks quite extraordinary, and it also seems like a game that could maybe even possibly overwhelm you with all of the different things that you can combine and just kind of play around with in its, well, sandbox world. So yeah, May is going to be a fun month for a lot of people, especially with Zelda Tears of the Kingdom on the way. Anyways, that's it for this episode, but if you liked the video, don't forget about notification and subscribe button for more content just like this. Also, if you'd like to support the channel through Patreon, thank you for making this content possible. Peace out.